Okay, so welcome. Chella and I are now working on a woodworking kind of basics of just how to join wood. We have a nice collection of scrap wood here that are really great for people who are new at woodworking to just kind of play with how do you assemble. I'm going to be basically demoing how to use a countersink screw, driver bit. This is honestly, I don't like doing brand, but I love this set. And so it has a larger size, three basically sizes. And I really love this. It's basically a perfect pilot hole that also delivers a countersunk screw. And I'm just going to see if I can really show you that. So this part right here, really, hopefully I'm showing this on camera, is the same shape as your screw. So you won't crack things as you drive them. I'm just gonna pause this for 1 second. Okay, jumping back at you for a second here. Okay, so realized I didn't have a piece of wood. So this is a miter joint cut out of 45. And this is taken apart from a student project last year before the pandemic. So you see that there's this nice screw is nicely countersunk through here. There's no cracking in this piece of wood, no cracking there. And then here is a example of a countersunk screw that is driven at an angle. So if I just kind of show you the angle that the screw is, this screw is literally at this angle here. And then this screw over here is at an angle kind of like that. And so that joint ends up becoming extremely strong. And if you put some glue, this joint, we can use wood glue, but for a joint that has maybe some chance of moving, and I can kind of feel it, that since it's not moving at all, and since there is this gap, if this was just wood glue, there's a decent chance this would kind of have a little movement to it. But what I'm realizing is that most likely, we use some expanding Gorilla Glue, which we'll show you in a minute as well. So there's two kind of types of glue that can work. We'll show it to you at some point in this demo. No rush. We'll find it. Okay. So so I want to kind of go through the process of how do you insert one of these countersunk screws, counter driver bits. So we have, we don't actually have a great selection of tools. These were actually donated to us recently from somebody who upgraded their own tools. So my preferred way to install a driver bit or any kind of drill bit is to stick the battery to my belly so that I can kind of open and close this with just one hand. And then I take the hexagonal shape between these kind of three expanding teeth. So you can see it opens and you can see it closing all the way. So I'm going to open it. And then I take this here and I stick this in. And then I just gently finger tighten it. And then I twist it. And you'll generally hear a little clicking. I'm not sure if you heard the clicking in that video. It's actually pretty quiet. This is not my favorite tool in the world, this brand. One thing while I'm here is that drills, and this is also often a confusing thing for students who are first starting at this, who have not used power tools, is that there's a forward and there's a reverse. So forward is, I'm going real slow right now so you can kind of see the movement, is going clockwise. And reverse is going counterclockwise. So you can kind of see that. I'm not sure how well this shows up, but when you get this tool in your hands for the first time, I want you to really just kind of slow down and just really pay attention to the tool by just pressing the trigger as lightly as you can. So a great first step to do when you're using this tool is to press the trigger as lightly as you can. Okay. And then when it's kind of when you're looking down it, and I hope in the video it doesn't get mirrored, is I can see it right now, and I hope you at home can see that it's looking like it's going clockwise. And that means it's going to be drilling a hole. Okay, so again, I would, to loosen it and take it out, you twist it, and this is called a keyless chuck, and then that will loosen it. Again, to put it back in, just really quick, and there it goes. Okay, so one thing with this tool is these tips, each of these costs about $7. And so do not sit it up like this. Do not keep it on your tool table like this. Always let it sit on its side when you are using this tool. I can't tell you how many tips we've lost over the years by just having it sitting up here, and it just kind of tips forward. I'm going to pause this for a second. We have somebody at the door. Okay, so that was Joe's crematorium at the door. You kill him, we grill him, is what they said, but we didn't have anybody for him. Okay, that was my one and only dad humor joke. Since I'm doing wood shop. Okay, okay, so we have our countersink bit in set. And I'm going to move these other ones. I'm using, so there's different sizes. For most of what you're going to do in this shop, we're going to use the smaller or the medium, but really either one can work. So I'm just going to set those over here. Actually, we're going to just kind of keep that out so you can kind of keep looking back if you need it. So the other step that we need is we need to sink these screws. So I have really come to find that these star bit screws, screw heads right here, are the easiest by 20 times for anyone, not just me, but particularly for the intro level student artist. I would only buy star bit screws for yourself. I'm trying to phase out all Phillips head and flathead screws because these, they don't strip, and they just you can drive them in and you can drive them out. Okay, so so how do these quick release work? So we only have one impact driver. An impact driver is really designed to sink screws and bolts and things like that. So you don't just push it in. You have to lift this little tip right here, and then you push it in, and then that releases. So I'm going to do it just, yeah.
Is there a good way to tell how far you should put in the bit?
So it actually, there's only one distance. So this one that has a quick release here, there's a couple ones. Shelly, you remember that short one you had just found? Let's just show why that's not a good one. So this right here, it has this connection right there. It's like a smart connection, you can think of it as. And essentially what happens is that when you lift this up, there's a locking mechanism that opens, and you just set that in. So maybe take that camera, and just so people can see it from two different directions as I do it, just kind of bring that one close for a second. Is so you lift it up, you take it here, you slide it in, you let go of that, and then this is now locked. So to release it, to get this out, you press that up, you lift it straight out, and you let go. There's no twisting, there's no locking. This is an impact driver, and you can actually use an impact driver with these countersinks as well. This is one of my top tools for any artist to have, is to have a set of a drill and an impact driver. So you set that in, and you can drill a hole. One thing that people both like and don't like about an impact driver is that it will often, when you're using it, it'll make a da-da-da-da-da-da as it's setting the screw. And so that's, and some people think it's not working right when you're doing that. But it actually is. What it's doing is it's kind of like using kind of a smart gear ratio to sink your screw. So you can see it kind of screwing now. So that star bit right there Hopefully the focus is not too crazy. Connects, boom. Okay. So one thing that hopefully you've kind of been able to tell is that there's different lengths of screws. You always want to figure out what the right length of screw is for your job. Yeah. Just one little nerdy detail is that these countersinks, they have these set depths that you can do, so you can change the depth that this collar is at if you're doing something very specific. So I'm just going to move this over a little. Actually, I'm going to leave this over, and we're just going to march over here for a moment. We're just going to march right here, and let's see how this works. Okay, so I have this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to unscrew this. So I'm going to use an impact driver to unscrew this. So you can see this kind of clicking sound. It starts to come out. And so you can notice that I kind of did this pulsing action, very gentle. I let the tool do all the work. Okay, so this screw, so it is very clear to me that this has glue in it. It's not just screws, because there is no, there actually, you know what? I didn't give it a twist first. So there is no glue on this. That was just screws.
Hey, Michael.
Hey.
Can you remind me how to tell what, like, if the driver's going in reverse? Or...
Sure. Thank you for asking. That is so important. Okay. So if you're right-handed, the left button right here is reverse, and the right button over here on your index finger is the forward button. So if you press that in, so that's pressed in now, that means it's going forward, and you can see that little arrow. Hopefully you can see that is going forward. And if you flip that over on the left side where your thumb is, the arrow is going backwards. And so it's now going forward because this is out, and you press it in, and now it's reversing. And so you can see now, if I go real slow, it's going counterclockwise. Well, if I then press this side, it's now going to go clockwise. So hopefully that is, and this is a very common forgetful thing. There's a lot of new stuff, and I just urge you to slow down and really just play with the tool for a little bit. Don't let yourself get frustrated. Don't think you're going to like do this off to the races right on your first time. Okay, so what I'm just going to I'm going to reset the screw in its hole. Notice there's no cracking because it was countersunk ahead of time. So I'm now just going to screw it back in. And that's it. So now it's nice and strong. It pulled it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now demo with this how to use the countersink. So we're going to do a quick camera angle change up. Okay, so we did a little camera angle change. So what we're doing now is, so this was already done for us by some anonymous human about 8 months ago, just before the pandemic. So what I'm going to be doing here is I want to join these two pieces right here. So these two pieces right here are what I want to join. So we need a few things that I haven't shown you yet before we can drill the hole and before we can sink the screws. So these are clamps. These clamps work in pretty awesome ways. Maybe Chella, you could lift up that camera angle so people can see it. Yeah, I think that's a little better. So you can see that what I have to do is I have to press with my thumb, my left thumb right here. I press that button in, and I can adjust this. I can slide this, and then with my left hand, I can screw this in, and it can change the depth. Notice that when it gets to the here, I can't tighten it anymore. So sometimes folks will be here and they can't get it any tighter, and that's the reason. So whenever you're done with the tool, I ask you to please kind of unscrew it all the way. Another thing that can happen sometimes is people can unscrew it all the way, and then they can't figure out how to start. So just kind of make it so that this little part can jiggle around still. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to try to clamp things in multiple places. So because I want to take screws, and I want to basically sink screws like this, And I'm going to just kind of use this opportunity really quick to, sorry about this, people. I covered over my screws with our jury rig tripod. So I have a couple different lengths of screws here. And so I'm going to say that that would be a pretty nice screw length to use. And that would be a great screw to use on this side. So maybe what we'll do is we'll plan to put a screw in, maybe we'll use a longer screw for this direction. So we get more thread. And then we'll use this slightly shorter screw. I'm going to use a considerably shorter screw to screw in this direction. So these are going to be at different heights within the wood. One way, and I'm just going to kind of mark it with a Sharpie so you can guaranteed see it, is that I will set it kind of in place how it's going to be so that I can keep track of my angle. And then this one here, I'll go like that. So I will just kind of keep track of my angle. So then what I'll do is I'll take my marker and I'll just kind of mark down here. And you can't exactly see what I'm doing, but I'll just rotate what I did, is I just kind of marked in a line down there. And that's where I'm going to set that screw. So I'm going to sink that screw before I mark that other one. And so it'll be a little bit more obvious. So that'll be my first glued joint, or my first screw joint. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use this kind of clamp. And I'm going to do the first one on top of the table. And then the second one, I'll do it underneath the table. So I'm basically pulling up. So the bottom of the clamp is underneath the table. I now will set it down so that it's on. So it's not clamped yet, but it's touching. Then I will screw it down. And so now this is nice and locked. If I was cutting this with a jigsaw, I would definitely want to use 2 screws. There's not going to be that much pressure going in here to pivot this. And this is a nice strong clamp. Okay, so then I'm going to take this here, and then I'll use this one, and I'll use this one under the table, which is something I'll often recommend. And I'll probably end up switching this out so it's not in my way. But for right now, it's fine. So I'll come down here, I'll pick it up. I'll make sure that the joint is connected and how I want it. And then I'll tighten it down. So now we have this. And then I'll just show you, I have a second clamp right here. It's a little smaller and it's a little bit simpler. There's a few less moving parts. There's no kind of metal thing here. And you can really just kind of work it. And these, if you have never used a clamp like this, I would start, we only have 3 of these right now. I got them as a test, and I think they've really proved themselves very intuitive for a few people I've asked to test them out who had no woodworking experience. So I'm just going to take that there, and I'm going to push it up that way so you can kind of most likely see. So it's really just, I just drop it down, twist it. And now this can't pivot. So this one could pivot a little bit. So you can see that little bit of pivot. This, it's really hard for it to pivot, but I can't quite get a second clamp there. But that's fine. Do you have a question? What's the?
Can you pause the recording for just 1 moment?
Oh. So we're back to recording here. We did a little bit of a change up with the camera angle. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pre-drill my hole with my countersink. So I have my countersink here. I have my line. And so it's easy for me to basically plan this out. I don't have to overthink anything now. So what I'll do is I'll come down low. I'll take the tip of the drill bit where I marked it. I'll have my elbows together. And I'm just going to basically slowly start. I'm not using any muscle. I'll get it to full speed. You'll notice I did not stop the forward movement. It stayed going clockwise the entire time in and the entire time out. Once it was fully clear of the hole is when I stopped it. And you note that I started it very slow to make sure it was driving nice and straight. I had my elbows in, and I hope in one of these shots you can see my elbows were in, and I just was going nice and smooth and stable. Okay, so now I have my hole. It looks just like a countersunk hole. It just basically looks like a hole with a place for the screw head to go. And I think it's actually better for me just to keep it in this way than to actually see the screw go in. So I'm now just going to kind of look at this. This is about the angle I shot it at. And I'm now just going to take this. I have this here going down. I have this here. Again, I have my right elbow is in the hip crease. And I just very slowly start. I just do a little bit of pulsing right there. And that's it. That's it, people. So I'm just going to kind of now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unclamp this. I'm going to unclamp this. And I'm going to show you just with one screw how strong this is. So with one screw, it is now pretty strong of an object. And it's a pretty compelling little shape. And it does have a slight pivot. And so the second screw is going to get rid of the pivot. This is also going to give me an opportunity to show you again, if you missed anything, how I did it. Okay. So I take this. I'm going to take, I'll keep it down. I'll keep it up for this second one. So this is the same thing. I'll keep it, and I'm going to pull it a little bit off so that you can actually see how important the setup for the screwing is. So I have this one clamp here. So that's going to clamp down. I'll use I'm going to keep my nice, this is a stronger clamp for the one in the back to make sure the piece that's receiving the screw is nice and stable. Basically, when a piece of wood is unstable, it will struggle to be as strong. That's a nice way to think of it, I think. It will struggle to be as strong. So you're doing the wood a favor by stabilizing it for this point. So again, I'll kind of check my screw. This is where I want the screw to go. I'll take my Sharpie. I've marked that screw. I'll now just come down in line, dot, 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 dot. I have a line. The chance that the two screws are going to hit each other is very limited. It's a very low chance. Okay. I feel like you were about to ask a question.
I was about to ask that exact question.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. Okay. So now I take this. I'm now going to take it. So you notice the first time I did it, it was a pretty straight 90-degree straight screw. This time, it's anything but straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it straight though, at the very, very beginning. Because if you start at an extreme angle, sometimes your countersink can actually slide down. So and this is one of the reasons why you want to get into the habit of just going ever so gentle when you start. So I just very gently start. And then once I'm in a little bit, now I can't slide. Now I find my angle. Again, I have my right elbow is in my hip crease. My left hand holds the drill. My left elbow is kind of against my body. And I now just very slowly, I kind of check to make sure I'm not going too much of an angle up or too much of an angle down. And I kind of I can look at it from the side. And I definitely encourage you, when you're first getting yourself comfortable with these tools, you look at it from the side and from above to make sure that you're at approximately the right angle. Okay. I start slow. And I never stopped it. So one thing I want to point out, and this actually might get to, if Chella had asked the question before I'd done it, she may actually, I think she pointed out to me kind of with her eyes just now that I ran a risk just now of ruining the countersink drill bit. Essentially, there's a piece of metal in there. So the two screws, I'm not worried. So my thing that I said was that I'm not worried about the two screws hitting each other. If the two screws hit each other, essentially they might just slip past each other. But if my $7 countersink blit hits the screw that I just put in there, that is not worthless, but it's close to worthless. It's 25% as good as it was. So you don't want to get into the habit of doing what I'm doing right now, of basically pre-sinking it. You want to basically countersink without metal in there. And if you know you have metal in there, what you want to do is you really want to alternate where the screws are, so that if the first screw, you can kind of make it high, and the second screw, you can kind of make it low. Does that make sense? So high and low, and then you're pretty clear. Okay, so now I'll take my screw again. I'll take it over here, and I'll take it here. I'll slowly start it, and then I'll just drive it. So you can see that it's just perfectly countersunk right there. It doesn't come sticking out far. I can now release it.
Michael, I have a question.
Yes.
How do you know when you're supposed to stop sinking it? Because it kind of makes the same noise the whole time.
It does, and I will tell you that is one of the reasons why I'm not the biggest fan of this brand of drill and driver. Is that there is this? It's basically when it hits a certain amount of pressure, it's done. And this is why I recommend folks start, and just start, because it does take some touch, and it's just about kind of practicing. You can kind of, in some ways, you can kind of see when the screw stops spinning, and you can also kind of feel when the wood cinches. So now this joint is quite strong. So this joint, and I'll just kind of switch cameras over here. So this joint is nice and strong. Did I start recording? Did I forget to start? Okay. So this is nice and strong here. And so now we have these 3 pieces of wood. We have a sample here of a nice clean angled 45-degree cut joint. And then we also have a 45-degree angle here, joined with just a straight edge here. And so you could do the same thing. You could also join this in this angle, or this angle, another piece of wood. So I think that about covers what we want to do. So if one thing that we kind of talked about at the beginning is different kinds of glue. So if you have a complex angle that you're not sure you're going to be able to kind of get just perfect, what I would recommend is using expanding Gorilla Glue. It's a polyurethane-based glue that will expand and fill the joints, and it'll make it so that even if you have a little gap like this one, it will make it strong. But you must be very careful. I really recommend you wearing rubber gloves. In COVID, rubber gloves are about twice as expensive. So just keep that in mind. And also, it's not as once it gets on your fingers, it really will stay there for a few days. If you have a nice clean joint, so a nice clean joint, I would recommend using just wood glue. A wood glue joint with pressure and compression is extremely strong. Okay, I think that about covers this. Plywood, I'll do one more quick thing. Plywood, if you want to glue some plywood together, you can take 2 pieces of plywood. And this is, sometimes I'll mention laminating to people. And I'll just laminate these 2 pieces of wood right here. I'm actually going to laminate something a little bit. I'm just going to laminate a little edge so we don't use up so much glue for a needless demo. So I'm just going to make this area. And so what I'll do is I'll, again, just kind of mark it, and I'll mark it. So unlike, my battery may not have been showing that overhead shot for a second. So I have this mark here, and I have this mark here. Unlike cardboard, when you want to glue up wood, it is vital, I think, to put glue on both sides. I like a little corrugation pattern. And then I just take a finger, I rub it over the whole surface area of what we're going to be joining. And we'll just make it straight. So you can see it kind of will sometimes move on you. And that is kind of what it does. And so what you do is if you're gluing it, you can take your clamps and you can just take one clamp. And this is, you start with just one and you'll see it kind of pivots. So then you can take your second clamps. And then you can see that there's still a little movement. And now I start to tighten it down. I start to tighten it down. And now that movement is gone. What you can actually do when it's still, before it's really tight, is you can kind of finger shift it with your fingers. You can use a rubber mallet to help you bounce it in place. That was not a rubber mallet. You can use a chunk of wood. And then once it's a little bit more set, you just keep going. So you can see there's some glue spill out. That is to be expected, and it is fine. Here is a rubber mallet. Thank you, Cella. And what you can do is, if you can either wipe this up with a wet sponge, you can wipe it up with a finger if it's not that important, but if it's a finished piece of wood, I would recommend using a wet sponge or a wet paper towel, and just kind of removing any excess. You can set that for 20 minutes, and then you can unclamp it if it's a big joint like this, and if it's not too important, with no screws, and that will be plenty strong. If you set this for 2 hours, that's going to increase the strength. And what I would recommend is if you're going to then cut this, I would give it 24 hours. But this, about 3 or 4 inches of overlap, about 1.5 inches wide, that's a nice strong joint. You actually, tomorrow, if I come back with just this clamping, it will be so strong that I wouldn't have to do anything. But if I wanted to sink a screw into there or into there, you could do that just as well. Same countersink, countersink. I think that's about it. Thank you for watching Wood Joining 101. Okay.